Hey there, you're listening to Genoa's Arcs, a self-reflective podcast exploring transformation with purpose, honoring growth and connection through awareness and presence. This is your host, Genoa K. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This episode contains reflections on trauma and emotional recovery. It is not intended as a substitute for professional advice. Please trust yourself and seek support as needed from a licensed mental health or healthcare provider. The views expressed are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect those of any guests, sponsors, or platform providers. As the creator and host of this podcast, I believe that service and sustainability go hand in hand. The idea that serving others must mean depleting yourself or working for free is a myth I choose to not perpetuate. While much of this content is freely available, you may hear sponsor messages or occasional requests for financial support, all of which help to keep this space alive and well. Some content may be offered through a paywall as a way to honor the time, energy, and skill it took to create them. If access to paid content is a barrier for you, please visit the show notes for more information. This is the third episode of a storytelling series within this podcast called The 6 Arcs, a spiral journey into emotional recovery. Each arc contains 10 episodes and traces a story of emotional recovery, reflecting the non-linear, often turbulent nature of finding the way back to yourself. Arc 1, Reclaiming Innocence, is where it all begins. The first moment you realize something is stirring. It's about awakening and making contact with the parts of us that trauma buried, distorted, and silenced. It's the beginning of a return to play, curiosity, creativity, and to the deeper truth of who we are beneath the coping and despair. This is the phase where our inner world doesn't announce itself with fireworks. It tiptoes in, often disguised as a question. Remember me? On episode 2, we explored the historical roots of innocence, how it wasn't always honored, and how reclaiming that innocence in adulthood can be seen as a radical act. On episode 3, we shift from the outer world to the inner world, because innocence isn't something we lost in the past as some external fragment. It's something that, in my experience, still lives inside us. Whether consciously or not, it's a part of us we often try to forget, ignore, or outgrow. On this moving episode, we meet the inner child. Just a quick note about this episode. I am not an expert on the concept of the inner child or any specific therapeutic model pertaining to inner child work. This episode regards the inner child as a singular concept for the sake of simplicity, while acknowledging that some therapeutic healing models explore the concept of the inner child as being comprised of potentially many parts. This episode is based on my own experiences with and what I've learned about the concepts of the inner child and inner child work. Part 1. What is the inner child? The phrase inner child has become a rather mainstream term, without an understanding that while we grow into adults, it doesn't mean that we stop being connected to who we were as a child. The inner child concept can seem confusing or even woo-woo to some. These days, the concept of the inner child is being explored on many levels. Some believe that it's not a metaphor, it's not a trend. It's thought to be a part of us that still exists, emotionally, psychologically, and in many ways physically, creating responses in our body that can feel unaligned with our present reality, which can be very unsettling to experience. It's believed that it holds memory, it holds sensation, and that it may even hold a key to unlock lasting change, growth, and healing. The inner child is the version of us that experienced the world before we even had language for it, before we knew it felt safer to hide our pain, before we developed coping strategies, people-pleasing tendencies, or wore socially acceptable masks. It's the part of us that felt everything deeply, that noticed things others thought we'd forget, that loved purely, feared honestly, and trusted instinctively, until that trust was broken. It's thought that this part of us never disappeared, that it shows up in ways that might feel surprising or out of control, in overreactions, in our tone of voice when we're scared, in the way we feel small when someone criticizes us, in the way we long for safety or lash out when we feel unseen. Perhaps the inner child isn't lost or gone, but rather waiting to be seen, waiting to be heard, waiting to be validated, waiting to be believed. Part 2. The concept that inner child reconnection is essential. So many of us have experienced exploring all the self-help we can get our hands on, reading the books, taking the courses, maybe even hiring spiritual healers or life coaches, meditating, journaling, taking yoga classes, or going on retreats, but eventually feeling stuck and drained, physically and maybe even financially. What we might be missing is, if our inner child doesn't feel safe, seen, or included, emotional recovery will often feel out of reach. Why? Because the inner child is thought to be the emotional memory keeper. They know what we've survived, they remember how lonely it was, they carry the longing for what we should have received, but didn't. And here's the thing that I experienced. My inner child doesn't need perfection from me. They need presence, they need protection, from the ways I used to put them in danger, albeit not on purpose, and from those who haven't done this important work yet and seek to gain from others what they have not yet earned. Reconnecting with my inner child is how I began to reclaim my innocence, not as just a concept, but as a living, felt experience. It was how I began to say, I see you, I believe you, you didn't deserve that. I'm here now, you are not alone anymore. That might sound simple, but it felt profoundly powerful, because the moment that younger version of me felt loved, real, non-judgmental, unconditional, patient love, something shifted. The panic lessened, the shame started to lose its grip, and my nervous system began to realize that the actual danger had passed, that I could face hard things, and that I could not only overcome them, but learn to live again, to rebuild, to reclaim my innocence. Part 3. What inner child work can look and feel like. Inner child work, in my experience, was not about reenacting my worst memories. Choosing to work with a trauma-informed, licensed mental health professional over a period of several years, I was encouraged to go at my own pace and to take a slow, gentle, mindful approach, a process that I still follow to this day and find useful in many areas of my life. Besides, I didn't have specific traumatic memories to look back on and reenact even if I'd wanted to do so. Perhaps you can relate. I had bits and pieces, terrible night terrors, weird recurring dreams, panic attacks, bouts with insomnia, and stories shared with me by others, but I simply could not fully trust any of it. This is why it's so important to understand that accessing vivid details of our childhood trauma isn't a requirement of emotional recovery. If it were, so many of us wouldn't have much hope of healing anything, simply because those memories are often deeply buried. Rather, in my experience, it was about making space for my inner child to feel seen, heard, and validated, so that they could finally feel believed without having to prove a thing, without having to remember or relive my painful past. I believe that the inner child is meant to hold the memory of innocence, not trauma. As an adult trying to heal, we're learning how to deal with emotions and feelings. If it's a huge challenge for us, how can we possibly expect our inner child to know how to hold or process our feelings or emotions, let alone integrate and heal them? A rule of thumb that's been tremendously helpful for me is to keep in mind while I did my inner child work to treat my inner child the same way I would treat an actual child. I wouldn't expect any child to be able to hold unresolved, complex feelings and emotions, certainly not on their own, without any help or guidance. So how can we show up for our inner child now? How can we help them to feel seen, heard, and believed without handing them the burden of proof and without any strings attached? Sometimes it looks like writing a letter to your younger self. Sometimes it looks like noticing when you feel reactive and gently asking, how old do I feel right now? No judgment, just observation. Sometimes it's as simple, depending on the situation, as putting your hand on your heart and saying, you're safe now, I've got you. Or, if it feels safe and not too triggering, and you have easy access to them, to glance through photos of yourself as a child. This is one thing that really helped me reconnect with my inner child. If you do decide to try this, I highly recommend doing so under the guidance of a licensed, trauma-informed mental health professional, or with a supportive, trustworthy friend. They can cover or remove photos of people or places that might trigger you. They can help hold space for any emotions that come up for you and be there if you need to decompress afterwards. For me, it helped to look at photos of myself as a child because it reminded me that my childhood has many great moments and wonderful memories. I didn't force myself through the process. It took a few different sessions over a period of nearly a year. No one suggested I take this approach. It just came to me, and I felt stable enough at the time to try it. I took it on with a curious approach to see if I felt differently about anything, and thankfully I did. It wasn't easy, but I was eventually able to look at the photos from a more compassionate place. It was more of a reframe than anything else, to see more of the good than only just the bad. It was certainly a turning point that helped me reconnect with, ultimately reclaim, and form an appropriate attachment to my inner child. To finally whisper to them, "It's time to be a kid again. I've got it from here. Go play and have some fun." After this experience, I felt different. I was more calm, better able to soothe myself, less angry, less reactive, no longer screaming or clamoring to be heard or seen or believed. It was then that I knew I'd rolled into a totally unfamiliar phase of my emotional recovery journey. My inner child was now fully free to hold the memory of my innocence and much happier times, rather than feeling responsible to hold mostly just trauma. We don't need to reparent ourselves perfectly in order to experience this shift. We just need to become someone our inner child can trust. That means being honest with them, kind to them, and consistent with them. It means putting in the effort, just like any good parent would, to keep them safe and protected, and taking accountability when we miss the mark, not to beat ourselves up, but to maintain our inner child's trust. It means lowering the expectation that they have to carry it all alone. It means showing up, especially when we feel like running, like the adults in their little lives should have been capable of doing, but just weren't. Because here's the thing that I discovered when I started showing up for my inner child, they started to open up to me about the living memory of my innocence. No begging, no pleading, no mind games, no traumatic walks down memory lane. I just needed to care about them and show that I wasn't going to turn on them, not as some manipulation tactic, but with the knowing that I was out of options, that it was time to surrender, time to trust myself, and time to start the process of discovering the answers within me to bring into my life. Hope, joy, and most of all, peace. Reclaiming innocence isn't about pretending nothing bad ever happened. It's about creating new experiences that begin to outweigh the old ones. Experiences that say, this time it's different. We can handle and overcome difficult and challenging experiences, maybe with a little help, and that's okay. We're safe now. If you've never thought about your inner child before, or if you've tried but felt silly or stuck, I want to invite you to start small. Picture a version of you, any age, who needed more love than they got, who maybe never had anyone look at them in the eyes and say, "You are good, you are worthy, you matter." Can you be the one to say it now? That's the beginning. That's the doorway. That's how we reclaim our innocence. Because when we reconnect with our inner child, we don't just heal ourselves, we begin to shift the story of what innocence means. It becomes something we protect, not just in ourselves, but in others too. Whatever approach you decide to take, I'm so glad you're here. If you've found value in today's episode and you'd like to support the ongoing creation of this space, you'll find ways to do so in the show notes. Support here is always optional, but also deeply appreciated. On the next episode, we'll explore how to build a safe space inside yourself, one where our innocence can actually live, not just survive, but thrive. Until next time, take good care. Genoa's Arcs is written, recorded, and produced by Genoa K. Original music composed and produced by Genoa K.